Now back to the show. This is AM 650's The Law Show.
Welcome back to the program. Sterling Fox with you. In studio are Michelle Coy and Joe Broadhurst from Henderson Heinrichs LLP, family lawyers for when you need to take a different path. And I was talking about how I got a little grief from my daughter when I tried to talk to her about a prenuptial agreement. She told me I was being a hopeless, unromantic old so-and-so. But, you know, it is the summer of 2014 and North America, and the failure rate for marriages is in excess of 50%, Joe Broadhurst. So a prenuptial agreement is, in many senses, particularly from a lawyer's perspective, darn practical, wouldn't you say?
I absolutely would say that. I think that you can really save yourself a lot of grief in the long term by being prepared in the short term.
And yes, it is unromantic. You must acknowledge that, Joe.
Absolutely. It is a very difficult discussion to have with your spouse. But I think that if you buck up and have that conversation, then you'll probably be better off in the long run.
Right. Michelle Coy, what is the difference between said prenuptial agreement and a cohabitation agreement, if at all?
You know, nowadays there's not a lot of difference. We have the new Family Law Act, which really brings in line the legislation for both married and unmarried couples.
Okay.
So, somebody who's just living with their partner right now, they could have the same sort of responsibilities that a married couple may have if they've been together for 2 years or more.
Okay.
So,
and that's now law in BC. If you've been living with someone for 2 years, you are, in all, for all intents and purposes, in the eyes of the law, married.
In a very general sense,
yeah.
If you are living in a marriage-like relationship,
right.
then yeah, you don't need that piece of paper anymore.
Right. And does that, at the dissolution of that relationship, after 2 years, it goes sideways and the people part company, would the same separation rules as a married couple apply, Joe, to that cohabiting couple?
Yes, except for having to get an actual formal divorce, they are in the same boat as a party or as two people who were married. So a lot of people have actually been caught by surprise by that. A lot of people don't realize that after 2 years of living together, they might as well be married for the purposes of the law. And especially with the new act, a lot of people were surprised because they didn't think property division applied to them.
Right.
It didn't.
Right.
It didn't used to.
Right.
So all of a sudden, the government's come and changed the law, and you're in a whole different world in a relationship and in a separation than you were before. And that kind of ties back to my earlier point about prenuptial agreements, is that you don't know when the government's going to change the law.
Right.
And you don't know how that's going to affect your situation in the long run.
Right. So the more you can frame the relationship in your own terms, the less influence the government's going to have when that relationship, Michelle, for whatever reason, goes awry.
You know, most people would prefer that they get to make the decisions on what happens when they separate and not the government. And I don't blame them. So having that agreement in advance, or at least talking to one of us and saying, look, what does the law look like if we split up in 5 years, hypothetically, what would happen? You know, and just having that conversation and having a knowledge. Because right now, I think if you ask the average person on the street, they actually don't know what would happen with their finances, with their children. They don't have an understanding. And especially with this new act, things have changed quite dramatically. So just having that conversation with a lawyer, I think is important for peace of mind.
One of the things that we Canadians as a group are constantly guilty of is watching too many American law shows. So our concept of law is frequently just dead wrong. It may be right on in California or Louisiana, but it doesn't work in British Columbia or New Brunswick. So, but from the California experience, and this goes back a long time now, this whole division of property between unmarried people, Joe, one thinks of the Lee Marvin case many, many years ago. That's now the law in British Columbia, too, isn't it? Once you've cohabited with someone for 2 years, all of those assets become common and become subject to some kind of legal distribution of some kind, right?
Yes, that's right, Sterling. So if you've lived together for 2 years, you're treated as a married couple now. And so what happens is that parties are allowed to, under the new law, to a certain extent, they're allowed to back out the assets that they brought into the relationship.
Right. And but that also is something you define up front, or do you have to?
Well, it's something that is very helpful to define up front.
Okay, all right.
and I think that we haven't seen a lot of cases about that yet because cases take a little bit of time to wind their way through the courts. So there's still a little bit of uncertainty about how it's all going to play out. But certainly, if you look at longer marriages, 15, 20, 25 years,
Right.
how are you going to prove what you brought into that marriage, and how are you going to prove what it was worth 15, 20, 25 years ago if you don't have something in writing about that? It's almost impossible. So there is a real difficulty just creating the evidence that you need if you're going to go through that sort of process after a long marriage.
I wanted to ask you both, and you've talked, Michelle, already about the fact. Come on down and talk to us. It will give you 30 minutes. It's a freebie. And if you've got some issues that you're really struggling with, talk to us. We'll be happy to tell you what your situation is. And from there, you can either hire us or move along, but at least you'll have a much clearer sense of what the situation you're in is. And in that conversation, and you'll do it for parents too, and I'm pleased to hear that, because more of us need to be a little better informed. Our intentions may be honorable and just true blue, but we may not do everything properly. So even from a parental point of view. But Michelle, when you have that conversation, sometimes at the end of it, you're going to look a person straight in the eye and go, you don't need a lawyer, really.
Oh, yeah. I do that all the time, actually. I tell people, look, you're going to leave this meeting and you're going to have peace of mind. You're going to know what to expect going forward. And a lot of times I will send people away and tell them to try to do it themselves first.
Right.
If they've got a problem, or I'll tell them, look, you don't need me at all. You have your answer, and you can go along, and maybe in the future you need me, and I'll still be here. So it's quite common that people don't actually need us at the time they come in.
Right.
But the information that we give them then will help them in the future when they do potentially need us to help them through some sort of a situation.
There's nothing wrong, Joe, is there ever, of having a sense of where you are. Even if you're going through a turbulent, emotional time, the likes of what you would never wish on another human being, still, where am I legally? Where am I going to go tomorrow? Where am I going to fund all of this? All of these huge questions, compounded by high emotions, really necessitate a chat with a lawyer.
Absolutely, Sterling. Information is your friend in these situations.
Yeah.
And you don't need to try to do it alone. There's people out there to help you, and the more that you can find out and understand what you're going through, that other people have gone through it, and that there are certain things that you can do to help your own situation, the better off you are.
I wanted to ask both of you about this because you do family law quite differently. You both work for Henderson Heinrichs, but your assignments within the firm are different. Joe, you're a litigator. You go to court a lot, and you're very happy doing that. Michelle, you're more inclined to the collaborative process, the mediation, and so on. And so what percentage of clients would go the mediation or the collaboration route, Michelle, versus those who are going to line up behind Joe and end up in court?
I think the vast majority still do the litigation path. And I have to say that is still the majority of my practice. And I think only because people don't understand the new options that are out there.
Right.
There is very new techniques to help you move to a resolution. And I think people they watch the TV shows, they talk to their friends, and they think the only way for me to solve this problem is to go to court. And so we have an awful lot of people that come in and want the litigation path.
Right, right. And Joe, does some of that come from, as Michelle just said, they talk to their friends? Well, my friend got a divorce, and she got everything, and that son of a gun deserved it, and you should too. So you just deserve everything, and that's that. So you go find a lawyer who's going to get you everything. Do people show up in your office demanding everything from that rotten so-and-so?
Yes, there is a certain amount of people coming in angry and really wanting to fight it out. And we try to diffuse that as much as we can.
I would think so.
The truth is that even though I do have a litigation-focused practice, I'm still trying to get the best possible result for my client at all times.
Right.
And often the best possible result is to stay out of court. And if I can use litigation or the threat of litigation as a tool to get the other side and to get my client into a situation where there's a very reasonable settlement, then I'm very happy to do that.
Right, right.
And so I think that it is definitely the case that people come in and they really want to have it out in court, but realistically, usually when you go to court, you don't end up really very happy. You end up out of pocket a little bit, and with a resolution that probably could have been reached if everyone had just come to the table and talked
Well,
reasonably.
isn't that the case, Michelle? When you go to court, you put everything in the hands of a third party, the judge, who will make a decision based on whatever presentations are made by both sides, and that's it. You may get what you want, you may lose everything. Why would that extreme risk be so appealing to so many people when they can sit down and hammer out a deal with both parties present, or at least in the same building, if not in the same room?
Yeah, I have to say that my mediation clients and my collaborative clients are generally much happier with the result because they have control over the process, it costs less, and they're not putting their lives and potentially the lives of their children in the hands of a stranger.
We haven't even talked about that part, the kids, and that'll come up. But, sorry.
No, so it's, I got to tell you, I think it's just education. I think that it is a preconceived notion that you go to court and you get justice.
Right.
And I look at court and I see it as a lose-lose situation for most people. You're losing money, you're losing time, and you're losing control over your situation.
Right.
There are examples of people that end up with good results and they're happy, but there's a lot of people that don't end up with good results. And when we get into a mediation room, you have to agree on whatever it is that we've come to a settlement on. So everybody leaves that room having played a part and being happy somewhat with the resolution.
Joe, you talked about sometimes court, or perhaps even the threat of court, causes people to go, oh, well, maybe I should take a look at another option. How does that work, though? How do you threaten someone with court in order to make them not go to court?
Well, Sterling, there's certain stages that occur in a family law litigation process.
Okay.
And the first stage is basically a mediation in front of a judge. It's called a judicial case conference. And you go in front of a judge and you explain your case, and they explain their case, and then the judge gives you some very good advice. And if you're able to settle things there, then you'll be able to settle.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you make this judicial thing? Does each party have a lawyer with them? Is that
yes.
allowed?
Absolutely, it's allowed and it's encouraged.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Although you can show up without a lawyer as well.
You can go without a lawyer as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a hearing that happens where you get really early on a judicial opinion in a non-binding situation, and that can be really helpful for people because it's often a wake-up call about how realistic their thinking is on what's going to happen.
Right.
And then there's another stage that comes after that where you can have interim applications. So what this is before having a full-blown trial, you go in front of a judge about certain discrete points, and you say, I want an order that's going to last until the trial.
Okay.
So maybe, parties have separated and the children are living with one person and the other person isn't paying any child support.
Right.
You can go in front of a judge and say, just until the trial, order some child support.
Right, sure.
And so these types of hearings are another great situation for a bit of a check your head moment for someone, because if you're taking a very unreasonable position at this stage, you can get smacked down by a judge and told, well, that's not the way it's going to go. It's going to go this other way.
Right, right.
So the stages of litigation give us a very good way to impress upon somebody that their dream of how this is all going to play out is not going to work, and that whether they come to the table reasonably or get dragged to a result in the end kicking and screaming, it's going to go in a certain direction, and they're better off just coming to the table willingly.
Right. Michelle, what happens when somebody shows up, and they're perhaps more likely to be in Joe's office than yours, but just a client cold call off the street wants that half-hour chat, and this person shows up in an extremely agitated state, which is not too shocking for someone in the divorce business, but this person is adamant, absolutely determined that ex-partner needs to be punished. Not only did they turn out to be a less than reputable human being, they're a rotten so-and-so, and the list goes on, and the air turns blue in a big hurry. That person must be punished. I will not be satisfied with anything short. I don't want jail. I want public humiliation. I want the world to know what a jerk this person is, and I will pay whatever it costs. Are they talking to the wrong lawyer?
They're talking to
They're
the
in
wrong
the wrong
lawyer.
law
They're in
firm?
the wrong office, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell them, look, I'm going to give you information that's going to help you resolve your matter. If you're not looking for that, if you're still too angry, you maybe are going to be wanting to be in a counselor's office or somebody else's office that can help you work through your anger.
Right.
Because I'm not there to help you with that. You know, it's confidential. You can tell me until you're blue in the face how much you hate the other person,
sure,
and that's
right.
totally fine. I hear that all the time.
Sure.
I've got tears, you know, most of the time, and that's okay. But I am not a tool to, you know, use on the other person to make them, you know, have a terrible life going forward, especially when there's kids involved.
And Joe's smiling because I called him a hired gun during the break because he's a court guy. He goes to court all the time. But that's the mindset. I'm going to get me a hired gun. I'm going to take that guy down. And you're not the guy, are you?
No, Sterling. But I talk to these people a lot, and people who are very angry, and I explain to them that under the various acts that cover family law, misconduct of a spouse isn't relevant to anything.
Right.
It just doesn't matter.
Infidelity and all that stuff, irrelevant.
It doesn't change anything.
Right. Okay.
And so,
it used to be grounds, didn't it? It used to. He cheated on me. He was unfaithful. That's grounds for divorce. Granted. Next. That cut and dried, wasn't it?
Well, it still is technically grounds for divorce.
Okay.
In order to get a divorce, you have to either be separated for a year or you have to have some sort of adultery or cruelty in the marriage.
Oh, really? Okay. That still applies. Okay.
It still exists, but it's not used very often because it's not very practical and it doesn't get you anywhere. You don't get more money. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't get some stapled bulletin board saying this person is a bad person. All you get is a divorce, which you can get anyway for being separated for a year. So we don't see a lot of that because it costs money without giving you any tangible returns, really.
So it all comes down, we need to take a break, but it all comes down, Michelle, to what you were both talking about earlier, this whole matter of decompressing the emotions out of people who are pretty wound up. You know, life is this is not the way the script was supposed to end at all, and I'm just a mess. That's why I'm here in your office coming apart at the seams. But that's fine, as you said, you see that all the time. Oh, yeah. But it's the anger, it's the over-the-top anger that is just, it's unnecessary and it's counterproductive.
Yeah, you know, they're probably stepping into our office and it's the worst time of their entire lives.
Absolutely.
That is common. And we expect that, and we don't expect you to be on the top of your game.
Right.
You know, but if we're actually going to help you settle something, you need to be in a certain frame of mind. And if you're not there, we may send you away and tell you to come back when you're ready to reach a resolution. Our guests in studio, Michelle Coy and Joe Broadhurst, lawyers from Henderson Heinrichs LLP, a Vancouver family law firm, online at hhlaw.ca. Got a couple of minutes here. Why don't you slide over to the old computer and check these people out? The pictures and everything, they're right there. And their contact points, all the email and phone numbers as well. Back with more in just a couple moments.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is AM 650's The Law Show.